All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's session of our webinar series. My name is Anasel Gasmi. I'm head of customer success here at Daloopa, and today's topic is how to use our very popular and powerful Retrofitter smart plugin to update all of your existing models. What we will be hang on. Just wanted to take a second to present the host for today. We have Thomas Lee, CEO co-founder of Daloopa, myself, and Leo Kolb, who's also the head of product strategy and knows all the details about the Retrofitter and can provide a lot of insights to how it works and how you can use it to your own benefit. What we will be covering today is first of all, how to update your existing models with our plugin, but also how to add audit trails to all of your existing data. So with that in mind, I will pass it on to Thomas, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Thomas. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. And for those who are watching the recording, please feel free to ask questions. Reach out to Anas, myself, if you have any questions. So the objective of today is to walk you guys through our Retrofitter and our updater. But before I get started with the demo, just want to highlight the key objectives of why we built the Retrofitter and the updater in the first place. So the concern a lot of our customers had was they wanted the ability for us to update their models, right? They don't want to say, oh, look, I already have a model that's been pre-built. I've managed and maintained it for a long time. I want to be able to update it in my format in the way that I'm used to, and I don't want to just update Daloopa's format. And our objective was to say, look, we have the database of all of the data already. Let us map our data into your models for you and enable you to update your models in one click. From our understanding, most of our customers take somewhere between 1 to 3 hours for every single company, every single quarter, just to update the models, right? As much as the act of updating a model is therapeutic, it's also very time consuming, and it happens to consume a lot of time at a point where you need time the most, right? You need it to be performing your analysis to understand what's going on in the next quarter. And so that's what the Retrofitter and the updater does. The objective is to enable you to update your own models. So with that in mind, let me jump right into it. And we will walk through an example of how to use the product. I will get into some of the details around the intricacies of using the updater and the Retrofitter. So in front of me right now is an old model that has not been updated and is not a Daloopa model. So what do I mean by that? This model is made up of hard-coded numbers for historicals from up until 2020 Q2. And going forward, these are projections, right? So think of this as your average, buy-side model or your sell-side model. You painstakingly built this over time. You have your own projections in there. And the objective now is to keep this model updated using Daloopa. And the first step to do so is to use what we call the Retrofitter. So once you have the plugin installed, you will see the Daloopa plugin in your home tab for Excel. And the second button here is to retrofit your model. So if you click into that, you'll get a pop-up that looks like this. And I'm just going to walk through one quick retrofit right now, and then we're going to go into the details of what each of these individual checks mean. So if you come in here, what am I essentially saying? I'm essentially saying for Excel column S, right, my last column of historical data that I have manually put in, I would like Daloopa to convert these numbers into Daloopa numbers. And all we're going to be doing is while maintaining your actual numbers itself, we will never change your number. We will add in a map into our database. So the ticker that we're doing today is CRM. This is a Salesforce model. Column with line item name, that's the first column right here. That's column A. Column to retrofit, the data I need mapped, is going to be column S that represents calendar period 2020 Q2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a row of checks. So column R is 2020 Q1. Essentially what this is saying is not only do I want to retrofit this quarter, I want to also check that this quarter is the same. So the idea behind this is very simple. For us to retrofit a number, all we have to do is find the map that your number is the same as our number in our database, and your previous number is the same as our previous number in the database, right? You can, for integrity, you can always add more rows here to include more historical columns. But for the sake of brevity, today I'm just going to use one column as a check to retrofit column S. So you hit update, and with no other interaction from your end, it's going to work. So what just happened? We did not change any of your numbers. We did not change any of your calculations. But what we did do is for every single one of your numbers, we added in a hyperlink. So if you click into the 1279 now, which previously was not possible, we're going to bring you to the source. Said differently, we just took your entire column and we mapped it to where you got the data from. So previously, if you didn't know where you got the 1070 euro geographical breakdown from, you can now click into it and we will be able to show you the source location. So that's the idea behind the retrofitter. The retrofitter takes data that you have already plugged into your models and maps it to our database. Once you have retrofitted your model, you will be able to use the update function to update it going forward. So because this is an old model, we know that obviously 2020 Q3 data for Salesforce is out. So what you can do is you can hit update column and you can say for Excel column T. Remember, column T is your assumptions, right? So you plugged in 13% and you calculated this 1320 as your assumption. We're going to hit update. It's going to take about 10 seconds. And what we're going to do is we're going to update your model. Right? We're going to convert your numbers. That 1320 is now 1311 because that was the actual reported number for Salesforce. Right? So we're going to capture the 1311. This is now updated. We do not touch your assumption or your calculation, and you can click in, and now you can audit your very own numbers. That's essentially the idea. So let me walk through high level again what the retrofitter and the update combination does. You retrofit your historical data, and because your historical data has been retrofitted, we will be able to update it. What is going on in the background is essentially we're saying once you retrofit it, you're creating a map between your model and our database. And because that map has been created, we will be able to update your model into perpetuity. If you want to update it for 2020 Q4, no problem. 2021 Q1, no problem. You can just keep updating going forward. In short, that's what the retrofitter does. We designed it to be simple, to be quick, and for you to be able to map your models into our database within 10 seconds. But now let's look into some of the finer details of how the retrofitter works. So right here, we have a couple of different check buttons. I will talk about auto map at the very end. So let's start with update column, sign check, and unit check. What update column essentially says is instead of updating this entire column, perhaps you only want to map some specific cells. So let's say I want to retrofit just cell R, R4, this 1245 number. I can come in here and say, I want 1245. I'm going to hold down my control key. I'm going to select 1252, 1364, and 714 as well. So what this is going to do is this is going to retrofit just these data points. Let's delete the check. I don't need that right now. And I'm going to say update. And what you will notice is we only retrofitted these 4 data points and we ignored everything else. So that is what update cells versus update column does. Sign check and unit check does something different. So how sign check works is if you think about how companies report their income statement. Companies tend to report income statement with revenue and cost of revenue. The problem is sometimes in a report, you will notice that cost of revenues are reported as negative numbers and sometimes they're reported as positive numbers, right? your model may always use positive numbers. And when you calculate gross profit, you are doing one minus the other instead of a positive number plus a negative number. So a lot of times your number in your model might be different from the company's reported number simply by a sign, right? You're using a positive number when the company is using a negative number. In that case, the retrofitter will allow you to turn on sign check, which means it doesn't matter if you are using a negative number or a positive number, we will retrofit it anyway. So that's what sign check does. Unit check does the same thing for units. So sometimes a company might report a number as 1245, right? Or 1234, let's say. This is what the company reports. But you are typing 1.234 because your model might be in thousands and the company is reporting actual numbers. If you keep unit check on, what is going to happen is we are now going to be able to retrofit your data regardless of whether you are using thousands, millions, or the actual number. So long as the difference between your number and the company's number is in orders of magnitude of 1,000, we will be able to retrofit it. That's what unit check is about. By default, I would recommend that you keep both sign check and unit check on because that just captures all of the corner cases. Retrofit formulas means if we find the actual data in your model that was created using a formula, and we find the same data in the company's disclosures, should we retrofit it? For instance, if you look at total revenues is a sum of subscription and professional services. This number happens to also be disclosed by the company, right? The company discloses it in the little table. Let's take a look at it. So while you might not have typed in the sum number, you created the relationship. And what we're going to do is we're going to retrofit that number as well if you keep retrofit formulas on. If you keep it off, then this number simply will not be retrofitted. Let's talk about the last feature, which is AutoMap. So what AutoMap essentially does is it allows the retrofitter to run autonomously without any input from your end. But sometimes you will notice that a company might disclose the same data points in different tables. For instance, if a company disclosed the revenue number in the sum of all the segmental breakdown, they will also be disclosing the same revenue number in the income statement. And you might want to choose where you want to source your data to. Sometimes you will be sourcing your data. Sometimes you want to source it to the income statement. Sometimes you want to source it to segmental breakdown. Sometimes you simply don't care. That's where retrofit manual map comes in. So let's try manual map. Right now, what I'm going to do is let me remove all the hyperlinks. And let's retrofit 2020 Q2 again. This time, we're going to use manual map instead of auto map. So we're going to turn on manual map. I'm going to say column S for 2020 Q2. I'm using column R as a check for 2020 Q1. And manual map is enabled. And we'll bring you to a new screen. So what are we doing here? We're going to find every single data point where the data that you placed in your model could come from more than one source. So for instance, in your model, total revenue subscription is coming from two different places. The first place is at the top of the income statement, subscription and support. And the second place is coming from the bottom of segmental breakdown, right? So let's say I want the bottom of segmental breakdown. I'm going to select this and I'm going to move on to the next one, right? Same total revenues for job. I'm going to search, I'm going to choose this. And you can run down this list very quickly and pick and choose the places where you want it from. Bear in mind, manual map is not a function of you deciding what is right for the number. The number will always be right. You are just picking the location in which the source is generated. So if I would update now, what you will see is we will now select the sources that you have created into the retrofit. So the 1279 is going to source into the into the Sales Cloud in this part that we've chosen, but the 4840, the one that we just did together, is going to come from the bottom, right? By default, this went to the top of the income statement, but because we selected specifically for it to come from the bottom of the segmental breakdown, this is how the retrofitter is going to work. Once you use the updating feature, you will then notice, because in the retrofit process, we chose for total revenues of segmental breakdown to come from the bottom of segmental breakdown. In the update process, you will also get it from the same location in a different, obviously in a different quarter, right? So that's why manual mapping might matter, because if you care about where your data is coming from, then you want to be able to map it into this particular period. So a couple of other things that we can think about, right? How else will the retrofitter and the updater work for you? So the first thing is to look at an industry model. So right in front of me is an industry model for semiconductors, right? This could be an industry model for anything. And our customers can build these models simply by opening up our model, our product, copy and pasting whatever is relevant. So in this particular case, let's say that what the customer is trying to understand is how much inventory is finished goods and how much inventory is work in process, right? In other words, you're trying to figure out if a semiconductor company is selling as much as they're making. So you can create this little dashboard and you can track all of these over time. The issue with these industry models is, while it might be painful to build, it's incredibly painful to update, because these models have dozens of companies in there. A lot of the data that you want to track over time don't typically happen to be from the income statement, right? It comes from footnotes, it comes from charts, it comes from all sorts of different places, and updating it is very onerous. So what we allow you to do is, once you have built this model, right, all of these data are copy and pasted from Daloopa models, you can keep this entire thing updated. You come in here, you say in Excel column AK, I would like 2021 Q3 data. You hit update, and we're just going to update the entire model for you, right? Every single company in there is going to get updated. Boom. So if you have a dashboard tracking work in progress versus finished goods versus raw materials for all semiconductors, you can get all of that updated. To drive the point home, I'm going to pull up a separate industry model, right? This is an industry model that compares auto units, right? We want to compare Ford, Tesla, and GM, right? Everyone knows Tesla is, the big disruptor to the vehicle industry, but the question really is, like, what are the numbers telling me, right? We know Tesla has higher gross margins, but is the spread between Tesla gross margins versus Ford and GM's increasing or decreasing, right? Is the number of units for Tesla really accelerating and taking share in an accelerated fashion, or is it not? So the best way to answer this question is to build a comp sheet, right? You have an industry model in front of you where you highlight Ford units versus Tesla units over time. And what you want to do is you want to keep this updated. And the easiest way to keep this updated is to basically use our plugin to do so. So let me just delete some data here. Pretend that we're now in 2021 Q2. Again, you come into the update feature and you say, in this case, Excel column AJ, I would like the latest quarter data. You hit update. And we're going to update every single little nook and cranny data for you. Wholesale units from Ford, right? Tesla delivery units, North America revenue, finished goods, raw materials, gross margins, like all the data that can be updated will be updated in this sheet. And as usual, you can always click in. You can always find a source in which we obtain the data, right? Ford is notorious for disclosing the data in this non-obvious format. They disclose it in like a presentation. Tesla discloses their data typically in a supplemental that they file for deliveries, right? We comb through every single document. We get the data so that you can update your models. I know I've been talking for a lot. I want to take a quick pause to see if there's any questions that we can field today.
There's a question that there was actually a few questions that were submitted from the users, but the first one is really, can you retrofit forecast?
Yeah, so you cannot retrofit forecast. So what the retrofitter does is it takes out data that's collected in historical disclosures and maps it to your model where you presumably have the same historical numbers. So if you have a forecast that gets updated using the updating feature, retrofit is specifically just to map historicals together.
Okay. And actually, to that point, does it matter which column to retrofit, or do you retrofit all columns in the model?
Yeah, good question. So it does not matter which column to retrofit. So long as you retrofit one column in your model, we will be able to update your entire model for you, right? So what the updater does is that it is looking in the row that it needs to update for data that has been mapped to Daloopa's database. So you could have retrofitted column O and update column T, right? It doesn't matter where the column actually is.
Great. And we just had one from the chat. If you have a new line reported by the company, is it possible to add the new line with this function?
So good question. So unfortunately, no. If the company reports new data points, what is going to happen is two things. The first thing is we will send you an email that tells you the new data fields that were added in the model on our platform. So if you log into the Daloopa platform and you download a model, you will get a model with any new data that has been added by us, right? So the data will also be highlighted in yellow. So let me show you guys an example. So that's wrong. I wanted to go to this and look up Amazon. So anytime new data gets added by the company, and we are then adding that data, we will highlight a row in yellow, and we will present it to you in the model when you download. And so from our customer's perspective, you will then need to copy and paste this data into your model if that is what you care about, right? The retrofitter only does the retrofit into your existing model, not for new data points. And what the updater does is that the updater is only updating for data that already is in your model. The reason we don't add rows of new data is because each of your models are different. You have different formulas, you have different links. The adding or subtraction of rows from your models often will cause ref errors that we don't want to introduce. So we will only update for data that we know previously has a time series already.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Actually, that also answers one of the questions that was submitted for this call in terms of what data does not get retrofitted. Is there any other type of data that doesn't get retrofitted beyond that?
Yeah, there are a couple of instances. So we've seen a couple of retrofit examples where it didn't work. The first example is if you are trying to retrofit data, and this is pretty common. If you're trying to retrofit data that has been adjusted, so what that means is been adjusted by a quarter or adjusted within the cell, then it's not going to work. So for instance, if let's say the company discloses America's revenue as 3370, but for some reason in your IR call, management is telling you, oh, really, 3370 is like a roundup. And you're saying, okay, never mind, this is 3369 instead. And that's what's in your model. If that's the case, because your data is actually going to differ from the company's disclosure, or let's say you do it this way, right? 3370 minus 1. Then this is actually not going to get retrofitted because we will not be able to find 3369 in our database. If that's not retrofitted, we will just skip that and we won't create a link. The second thing that happens, and this is actually a good way for you to check that your models are accurate, is typos and shifts in quarters. So sometimes people we've seen people name the quarters wrongly, and sometimes we've also seen typos. As you guys probably know, when you're typing this at 11 p.m., it's easy to make typos. Obviously, typos will not be retrofitted, and so it's actually a good way for you to just retrofit and see what's not retrofitted. And there's a very good chance it might have just been a typo from your end. Outside of that, pretty much everything else, if it has been disclosed, should be retrofitted in your model.
Okay, so there's no other reasons you can think of that would prevent data from getting retrofitted.
Yeah, so the philosophy is if the data is correct, we will retrofit it. If there is any question around the integrity, we will not retrofit it, right? So when we do retrofit, what you can be sure of is that we have found an exact match between your time series and our time series, right? And our time series has to be an exact match to the company's time series. So if your data is retrofitted, you can pretty much be guaranteed that your data is accurate.
Yeah, and actually that raised another question. Sorry, I'm just trying to read it. How do you determine what it means to be in a calendar quarter?
Yeah, so good question. As you guys probably noticed, we are using calendar period for retrofit and not fiscal period because companies all have different fiscal period ends. So what we use is called the mid-quarter convention. If a quarter starts in February 1st and ends at the end of April 30th, right? The middle of that quarter is going to fall on March 15th, roughly March 14th, 15th, right? March 14th, 15th falls within the first calendar period, right? The first calendar period starts Jan 1, ends March 31st. If the middle point of a company's fiscal period ends within that calendar period, we call it calendar Q1. So if fiscal quarter starts Feb 1 and ends April 30th, that will be calendar Q1. And I don't care what fiscal quarter the company calls it. They could call it fiscal Q3 if that's what they prefer. And that's why we only use calendar period, because calendar period normalizes everything using the mid-quarter convention into something that we can compare apples to apples to. So Salesforce is actually a good example. Salesforce fiscal period is an entire year ahead of the calendar period.
That makes perfect sense. At this point, I want to open it to the community just to see if there's any additional questions, anything that is unclear. I know there was a lot of information that was provided by Thomas, and Thomas, thank you so much. Any last questions? Any clarifications that you guys need with regards to the retrofitter? I think you did a great job, Thomas. I think there's no more questions.
Yeah, the one thing I will highlight is if you guys go to docs.daloopa.com, docs.daloopa.com, you will see our documentation for all of our features. And under Excel plugin, there's Retrofitter and Updater. So we give you a detailed breakdown of everything that I talked about today. They will all be in here. There'll be a video. We'll be uploading this webinar that we just did into this area as well. And then you can go into the updater and you can get the same flavor. So if anyone needs a refresh around how everything works, you can refer to this documentation. Again, it's docs.daloopa.com.
Yes, and that's an excellent point, Thomas, because that is where we will be uploading a recording of this webinar, and also we will be sharing it with you through email. Just a last reminder, we have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks in a very similar topics, just how to update your models using Daloopa. Just look for that invite. And if there are no last questions, Thomas, don't know if you have one last time for a last comment.
I think we've covered everything I would like to talk about for Retrofitter and the updater. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to email anas.alkasmi or myself, thomas@daloopa.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.